Although Back to Earth was a success, it was another 3 years before Red Dwarf Series 10 finally hit the screen. Like with Back to Earth, Doug Naylor was the sole writer and director. Now, this may or may not be set before Back to Earth, because Back to Earth said it's set after Series 10. But exactly nothing comes of that, so I'm going by release order. There's been some more redesigning. The exterior is the darkest red it's ever been, possibly because the Lister stopped painting after Series 2. New production designer Michael Ralph decided to put his stamp on the interior by changing the base colour from grey to red. He did this because he thought it should look more like the outside of the ship. It's a fine look, but pointless, and that kind of thinking will put a car rental place on the bridge of the USS Enterprise. I just take it as more evidence that the show skips to a parallel universe every so often. Dave wanted to film it like Back to Earth, as in like a film because it'd be cheaper, but Naylor fought for a studio audience. This had the knock-on effect of making everything more expensive because they had to build actual sets again. In the end, they filmed it in a sitcom style with HD digital film cameras, making it an odd mix of the two styles. Before writing, Doug Naylor was given a list of possible locations they could film in, so he could efficiently write the episodes around what's available rather than rushing to find locations that fit. But just before production, he lost 2 weeks of location shooting, so there was a ton of last-minute rewriting. The last 2 episodes were written during the 10-day Christmas break. Doug Naylor's son Richard became a co-producer, and they had to build a new Red Dwarf because the BBC had lost the original model shots taken for Series 1. The new Red Dwarf was actually the longer Series 8 style one created for the remastered releases. In the end, they cut a chunk out of the middle of the Series 8 style model and glued the 2 edges together to recreate the short, squat look. After they disguised the join, it looked pretty good. Pity about the shade of red. Series 10 aired from the 4th of October until the 10th of November 2012, and since it's only 6 episodes long, hopefully this video will be a sane length. We start with Kat and Lister discussing the number of traffic accidents caused by moose in Sweden.
Well, if they're stupid enough to let them drive, what the hell do they expect?
The more things change, the more they stay the same. In that same spirit, Rimmer's failed another officer's exam. The ship's picked up another derelict, so they go to investigate. It's the SS Trojan, which was top of the line when the accident happened on Red Dwarf.
Maybe we could swap ships. This baby's got to be better than Red Dwarf. That crate's slower than the speed of dark.
Unfortunately impossible, sir. The Trojan is not flight-worthy.
Thanks to Rimmer messing with the shipboard MacGuffin, they pick up a distress call from the other ship. 2 ships in one day, their chance of supplies and or adventure just went up. Anyway, from the second ship they pick up a distress call from a familiar voice from the past. Howard Rimmer.
Your brother, sir. What are the chances? It's extraordinary. Did the rod do this?
Well, that rod's probably infected with a luck virus. Actually, nah, it's a quantum thing that draws things together because quantum entanglement. It's usually used in interstellar travel, but also useful in kickstarting plots. Howard's a big shot in the Space Corps who became a ship's hologram. Rimmer decides it would be way too embarrassing to save him while still being a pleb, so gives himself 15 hours to pass his exams and become an officer. Howard's ship has 17 hours until it's destroyed, so if Rimmer doesn't pass, he can just call it revenge for all the childhood bullying. Lister's on the phone to an automated sales system run by mechanoids. He ordered a machine to stir coffee, even though he already has Crichton. And even though he's the only human being left alive, he ends up in a call queue all episode, because even in the future, phones are shit. Random fact that was mentioned in the extra features in the series' DVD, Robert Llewellyn has spent his whole time as Crichton wearing the same pair of boots. Bet your life is enriched for knowing that. Anyway, Rimmer's revisions going so badly turns into an iMac.
Who am I kidding? I'm never going to pass this exam. It's so unfair.
Even funner fact, I edited this on an iMac, and this happened more than once. They restart him by probably some light defragging and by draining his resentment. About 60% of the memory in his light B was clogged up with it. Still, the experience has cleared his head and it's obvious what he must do. Get everyone else to dress up as the crew of the USS Trojan and pretend that Rimmer's the captain. Then rescue Howard, and after that I really don't know, the Trojan's too busted up to really operate. Naturally, Howard's a little surprised with his brother's success.
But you were an utter twat!
That is Mark Dexter doing an excellent Rimmer. The officer with Howard is a simulant, the evil robot's first seen back in Justice, so we know where that's going. Now Lister's accidentally worn the uniform of a touch telepath, and Howard wants a demonstration of his powers.
You're thinking I'm squeezing your head too hard.
That's amazing. That's exactly what I was thinking.
Anyway, after seeing Rimmer's success, Howard's so resentful that his hard drive crashes. Howard, like Rimmer, is another failure.
I made you that jealous. Me.
He only pretended to be the massive success that Rimmer thought he was.
I am in the Space Corps, but I'm not a captain. I'm a vending machine repairman.
I want to know, seeing as it's 3 million years in the future, how is there still a Space Corps, and why was Howard brought back as a hologram? He's a lowly technician. Whatever's been going on in his ship, it's clearly as convoluted and continuity mangled as on the Red Dwarf. Anyway, the simulant officer killed the rest of the crew because she's a simulant and that's what they do. This is a bit like a 50s horror film unmasking the villain, only to reveal that it's a sinister man who lived in a house full of skeletons and was played by Vincent Price. Anyway, she's defeated through a mix of Lister insisting on finishing his call, Howard sacrificing himself to save Rimmer, and Kat jamming the accumulated resentments file into the simulant's neck.
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Anyway, Howard dies and he's posthumously awarded for his bravery when the onboard computer, who's not Holly, tells the crew to rename the Red Dwarf after him. This makes Rimmer so resentful that they forgot to add the special effects. On the other hand, Lister finally gets his backup coffee stirring machine should anything happen to Crichton. This isn't the strongest Red Dwarf, but it's far from the worst. It's a breath of fresh air after Series 7 and 8. Its grasp of internal continuity has become as loose as Holly's grasp on reality. I like the Star Trek stuff, like the uniforms and transporters, though the Lister winning on the phone subplot was a bit crap. This episode was dedicated to Jo Howard. She worked on Series 7, 8, and 9, working her way up to producer. Next up is Fathers and Sons. Lister's getting hammered so he can write himself a Father's Day card. If you missed Series 7, Lister is his own dad, and he's in love with his mom. The idea is that if he gets drunk enough, he won't remember what he wrote when he opens it.
Oh, look at that. Dreads. Brilliant. I mean, how funny is that?
Rimmer points out that Lister is a terrible dad. He left himself in a box in a pub in Liverpool. Could have been worse. Could have been Manchester. Anyway, check out Lister's jacket. The designs were done by a pro graffiti artist. In universe, Lister probably did that himself, seeing as he very briefly attended art college. Lister heads to a meta-computer for parenting advice, how to be a better father for himself, and it suggests tough love. This involves getting drunk and recording advice messages to himself. And of course, spacing his guitar for not following his advice.
I really love that guitar. You don't understand me. I hate you.
Eventually, Lister resigns from the crew to punish himself, thinking that he wouldn't be able to get any food until he tried to better himself by re-enlisting. Thing is, he didn't know that he could only re-enlist if he was under 21, and that his allotment of ship-issue oxygen was also going to be removed. Meanwhile, there are two other subplots. Crichton's been playing Chinese whispers, aka telephone with some food dispensers, and Rimmer says that it's a racist term, so Crichton asks the dispenser whether it agreed. So the dispenser then asks the cat, and you can guess where this is going.
A Chinese whisker's racist?
Oh, that's a very strange question, Mr. Cat.
I have no idea if the term Chinese whispers is racist, but that voice is borderline and it might have crossed the border. And after a lengthy spiel from Taiwan Tony, the vending machine, in that voice, we get this response.
I ask people who pass, I ask every time.
Thanks.
That doesn't sound like Cat. That sounds like Danny John Jules' actual voice, and he sounds a bit pissed off. Famously, outspokenly anti-racist Danny John Jules. Draw your own conclusions.
Thanks.
Racism being brought up at all in Red Dwarf is really weird, because I'm pretty sure this is the first time it's been done. It was a post-racist future so far beyond it that apparently it wasn't even remembered. Bringing it up now is just jarring. The last subplot is Crichton and Rimmer installing a new computer to replace Holly. Rimmer doesn't give a crap about the little details, but is all over the important stuff.
I order you to select 36D as the breath size for the new computer. And that's an order.
Personality.
Whatever. Accent. Whatever.
Frame size.
Your call, let's launch, who cares?
You'd think that frame size would be pretty important for seeing those breasts, or is she the only one who can if she looks down? The new computer has the ability to predict crew members' behaviours and wants, so think of something like Queeg from Series 2 crossed with Cassandra from Series 7. but as hot as rumour wanted.
I order you to select 36D as the breath size for the new computer.
There is now a 98% probability you will discuss my potential for changing your lives and reach the conclusion that you're looking forward to seeing me in action. You now no longer need to have this conversation and can do something else.
Hey, new computer.
Got a job for you.
I know.
The new computer, Pre starts making life hell by helpfully predicting what Rumour wants to watch, watching it, deciding he wouldn't enjoy it, and deleting it. She then conducts repairs in exactly the way the crew would have done, which leads to the ship beginning to fall apart.
And you're saying because I would have cocked all this up, you cocked it all up for me?
Precisely.
Of course, with Lister gone, the ship's mission, get him to Earth, has changed. Now it's to fly the ship into the nearest sun because it's too expensive to maintain.
What? What about us? Never mind us, what about me?
Lister gets back on board by flying in through the ram scoop at the front of the ship. A ram scoop is a theoretical spaceship propulsion system proposed in 1960. Here's what they look like in Star Trek. It scoops up hydrogen, which it then combusts to fuel the ship. Somehow Lister remains uncombusted. Pre-unleash laughing gas and garbage mechs to kill them all before they can get to computer banks with an axe and give her reprogramming she will never forget. Lister, though, manages to outsmart her by remembering that he created a separate medical file for himself as Dave Lister Jr. as a crew member. He was technically born less than 21 years ago, so he's still crew and can have her deleted, which he would, so she politely deletes herself.
Rock and roll. Dave Lister saves the day.
Now, for all intents and purposes, he's officially Dave Lister Jr. and his dad, who enlisted back before the show began, died in space. I hope you got all that.
Mr. David Lister Jr., sir. Welcome aboard.
Apart from the kinda, sorta, probably racist stuff with Taiwan Tony, this is the single best episode of Red Dwarf in a long time. Probably since Cassandra back in Series 8. It was clever, vintage Dwarf that easily could have just copied earlier concepts, but it put more than enough a new spin on them. All three plots wove together perfectly. Well, sort of. The Chinese Whispers one only sorta connected in the end.
That crazy question you asked! I've got the answer! Do Siamese sisters get whiskers in stasis? Nah, they don't.
Still, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. What makes this even more impressive is knowing that Craig Charles had the flu while they filmed this. Live on stage with a studio audience, and he still knocked it out of the park. Next is Lemons, aka Red Dwarf Does Life of Brian. It opens up with Lister cooking up some meat he found near Crichton's quarters and Kat stealing it. Well, I don't know if stealing's the right word. Kat has literally no concept of other people's property.
Enough for me?
Just one steak, one chop, one rib.
Great. Just enough. Catch you later.
Anyway, Lister then starts revising. He's enrolled in a robotics course, mainly to improve himself and impress his dad / himself. It makes sense for him though. He did manage to rebuild Crichton twice. Someone who was invented after Lister's time. And that's before he read that book. Crichton's located a rejuvenation shower among the stuff that the ship was transporting. It was among all the other stuff that need to make any given episode work when they don't fancy scripting the word derelict. A rejuvenation shower basically returns your body to its ideal form. Younger, stronger, fitter, etc.
It can restore you to your physical prime.
Oh man, how great is that? I can go back to last Thursday.
After the IKEA flat pack construction montage, they give it a go in Lister's bacteria-rich socks. Naturally, it gets its revenge and sends them all back in time. Accidental time travel must be next Tuesday.
I fear we may have time traveled, sirs.
I told you those white plastic clippy things were important.
We're in a land called Albion, sirs, better known as Britain, and the year is 23 AD.
I really like how this is the show's second ridiculous time travel method that randomly involves a shower. Anyway, they fortunately have the remote that should send them back to Red Dwarf. Unfortunately, it's out of batteries. For some reason, it's not compatible with any of the batteries that Crichton must have inside him. But it is compatible with batteries made from fruit. So they walk to India to find lemons. Now, I was as shocked as you to hear that the nearest lemons to Britain in 23 CE were in India, but apparently that's pretty much true. Europe wouldn't see its first lemons until the 2nd century.
India? How far's that?
4,000 miles, sir. If we walk briskly, we'd get there in 6 months.
6 months?
At least they'll arrive long before my Series 11 video. Once they make it to India, they find the one fruit seller who can speak perfect English. because she used to live in Britain.
I lived in the land of Albion for 10 full cycles of the moon.
That is so silly. It'd be better just to not mention the language problems. She then gives a very long and dramatic speech about the terrible ways that her family were murdered by the Britons while she watched, which Lister responds to with,
Right, have you got any lemons?
It's like the episode briefly went on a joke strike. What about something like this?
Then the druids drank their blood and ate their meat and said that the harvest would be bountiful.
So you lived in Norwich. Have you got any lemons?
We need copper for the positive electrode.
Copper? Where are we going to get copper?
Isn't Britain famous for its copper?
Now, they find some by melting down some coins. So are you wondering why I called this Red Dwarf Does Life O'Brien? Well...
Jesus!
Yes.
What?
23 CE was part of Jesus' missing years, after he was a kid in the temple and before he started his ministry. And this isn't the first thing to suggest that Jesus learned stuff in India. Anyway, things get theological when Rimmer goes into detail about his religious upbringing. He was raised in the Church of Judas, which teaches that Judas was crucified in Jesus' place and sacrificed his life and reputation to bring salvation to the world, allowing Jesus to pretend to be resurrected to complete his mission. That idea is so brilliant from a theological point of view that I'm shocked that church doesn't actually exist. Of course, it doesn't line up with Rimmer's family being Seventh-day Adventist Hoppists who believed in faith, hop, and charity, but continuity is optional.
It was all based on 1 Corinthians 13, where it says, faith, hop, and charity. And the greatest of these is hop.
Anyway, Jesus invites him to join him for dinner, and any bets that guy at the end will actually be revealed as Jesus in a twist ending.
I spied 2 soldiers. Jesus, they're onto us.
Problem?
Mine enemies are many.
Anyway, some Roman soldiers have made it to India to capture Jesus because Dragonblade is apparently a documentary, I guess. I mean, there were probably some Romans in India, but they'd be traders or merchants. There was definite trade at this point. But the first recorded Roman in India was in 40 CE, 17 years later, and he was a ship captain. And this wasn't a one-way thing. An Indian made it to the later Roman Empire, though not Rome. He was apparently a monk of some kind and burned himself to death, which is a hell of a TripAdvisor review. And that's to say nothing of the long history between India and Greece, or the time China and a Hellenistic kingdom went to war over some horses. But alas, this video's not about history, it's about Red Dwarf. They make the lemon battery and bring Jesus with them. He obsesses over the genius of stuff like bags, and Crichton works out that he's a large kidney stone. Crichton's well qualified to do removal though. He's been removing dying parts of Lister for years and storing them near his quarters.
Excuse me.
Anyway, they knock Jesus out and start the operation. Rimmer's thrilled to hold Jesus' cock because, well, you would be, wouldn't you? This whole kidney stone thing was lifted from the unmade movie script and was originally about Captain Hollister. They leave Jesus to recover from the operation and he finds Lister's Notable People book. Naturally, he reads it somehow, finds himself and freaks out. He heads back to destroy his reputation.
So this Christianity thingeth never taketh offeth us. What about Christmas? We've killed Wallace and Gromit.
Hilariously, he goes into an Old Testament rant about God, and the one important Indian character in the episode is apparently Jewish.
And when I've finished coveting things, I might make a small statue out of wood and idolize it a bit. You better watch yourself. God is a jealous God.
It's like they wanted to be as accurate as possible to the obscure history of the lemon, but they had to turn India into Palestine to make their plot work. Now that's not to say that there weren't any Jewish people in ancient India, because there were, and they'd been there for a long time before this is said. However, there's also the Roman soldiers, who most definitely weren't there. The crew find him, engage in a slap fight, and try to get him to accept his destiny.
Look, so some stupid people did some stupid things in your name. It's not your fault. You make a lot of people happy.
Now, why can't Lister connect with how Jesus is feeling? Isn't he the accidental god of a whole race of sentient people who murdered each other in his name? Or do cats suddenly not count?
I just wish I could meet them and explain and apologise.
Well, that would look spectacular, wouldn't it, Lister? God returns in all his splendour and says, sorry, it's all been a total cock-up.
You know what would have been better than this? Cat insulting Jesus and human religious beliefs in general and getting defensive when cloister is mentioned. And then insulting Lister because that stupid monkey still thinks he's the true god.
Listen, you stupid monkey. Cloister is another name for God.
Demented comic hypocrisy. What we get instead is a cat who vaguely gives a shit about meeting Jesus, and Cat doesn't give a shit about meeting anyone unless they got tits.
I am your god. Okay.
Turn this into a woman.
I don't want to walk down the street and have people say, oh, look, there's the Jesus of Caesarea, the guy who caused all the wars.
Jesus of Caesarea?
Yeah, he's not Jesus, and he's very much happier for it. And because it turns out he invented the designer shopping bag. Anyway, I was right. There's the actual Jesus from earlier on, and his twin brother, Judas. This one's a mixed designer bag. The basic idea was fine, though it's pretty obvious they had the meeting Jesus idea first and then came up with anything that'd get them there, without worrying about little things like making sense. Apart from that, the main problem with the episode is that twist ending. It's funny, but it's still a cop-out. And how they basically got Palestine and India mixed up is just bizarre. Yes, people from Palestine sometimes went to India. Yes, according to some myths, Jesus went to India. But India wasn't a part of the Roman Empire, and a random Indian was unlikely to give much of a crap about the Ten Commandments.
You better watch yourself. God is a jealous God.
So yeah, mixed bag. Had high aspirations, didn't reach them. The next episode is Entangled. It opens with Lister causing a small electrical fire by dropping hot sauce on something important. Luckily, he's able to put it out by fighting literal fire with figurative fire. Rimmer's making him fill out an accident report form, which he's ignoring because he's detected life on a nearby moon. Meanwhile, Crichton's telling Kat about some tech that he scavenged from the SS Trojan, a quantum drive, and it started to do some weird stuff.
Hey, we both said that at the same time. And that. What's going on? Why are we saying everything together?
The crystals in the drive are making coincidences happen more often. Anyway, Lister got himself locked out of the ship. He was off investigating the life signs. They're creatures called Begs, biologically engineered garbage gobblers. They're like Gelfs, but useful. Now, Lister said that he took Starbug to investigate the Begs, so why the hell is he locked out in a spacesuit? Well, he lost Starbug in a game of poker.
You lost Starbug in a card game?
It's not a big loss, seeing as they didn't have the budget for a Starbug set this series.
There is an upside.
Upside? How can there be an upside? What's the upside?
I lost Rimmer too.
The Begs will be around to pick up Rimmer in about 24 hours. Usually they'd show us all this stuff, the card game, etc., rather than tell us about it. That was probably lost when they had to cut down on location shooting. Anyway, Rimmer and Lister have a typical farce-ish scene, where Lister thinks they're talking about losing Rimmer, and Rimmer thinks they're talking about filling in accident report forms. Thankfully, Kat's total lack of subtlety ends it before it gets too tiresome.
Lister, I've told you 1,000,000 times. You gamble with lowlifes, there's only one loser.
In this case, there's two.
Who's the other one?
A guy about your height, your colouring, who goes by the name of you.
They can't even do the dwarfy thing and run like hell, because the Begs attached a bomb to Lister's groin. Out of ideas, they little head to the Begs' camp and... ooh, nice digital match shot.
Kasmin. He says, so you return with my winnings. Ha 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 ha.
The chief of the Begs is played by Steve Wickham, who got a promotion from playing Lister's Gelf bride in Series 6. Quite apt, really, seeing as these guys are just a worse redo of that Gelf design. Anyway, because Wickham is destined to play people who want to fuck Red Dwarf crewmen, he seems to find Rimmer and Kat very sexy.
And a sexy-like man, with the lady legs so long and luscious. And your scented shiny friend, too.
He's yet to turn up again with an interesting Crichton, but it has to be a matter of time. Anyway, they try to con the Begs by telling them that Rimmer is old and crap and offering instead the Spoon of Destiny, the most powerful spoon of all time.
He that hath the spoon controls all things. No object hath such power.
Also the spoon that the British monarch is crowned on. They're too smart for that, though, so decide to play some cards to try and win everything back. That idea is cut short, though, when the Begs start to choke to death en masse.
He's speaking choking to death, sir. It's very hard to translate if you're not being strangled.
No, don't die! Don't die!
Why'd they die? Something to do with Kat and Crichton's quantum coincidence nonsense. Anyway, they've only got hours until the bomb goes off, and Lister's genitals start their own space program. Crichton suggests using him and Kat's quantum entanglement to their advantage. If they're made upset or angry, coincidences will happen, and eventually they'll save Lister. Because that's how reality works now.
Ever heard of the expression, as cool as a cat? We're pretty hard to fluster, buddy.
Stage 1 achieved.
You know, one of the charms of earlier Red Dwarf is that they sort of tried to get the science lined up a bit, if time travel showers weren't involved. This is just a retread of the luck virus that makes even less sense. Anyway, through a well-timed old movie and a book cover, they tracked down a space station. A space station specialising in crap science because many great discoveries were made by accident. And good scientists make fewer mistakes.
Did it work?
No. The man behind the idea was so depressed, he attempted suicide. Naturally, he failed, and he went on to live into his 90s.
To get into the station proper, Rimmer has to turn soft light and walk through the door, so it's good to know that his light bee is now intangible. And after opening the door, they forgot to add the red shirt colouring, so it looks like he was having a spasm. They find a life sign in stasis. She was one of the scientists working there. Unfortunately, she tried to speed up evolution and turned herself into a chimp. Well, I can't say she didn't nail the crap science thing. Anyway, they found the ray that she used to turn herself into a chimp, and Crichton's able to reverse it.
Oh, Smeg, she's human. Oh, Smeg, she's naked. She's also naked.
She's also crap at everything, you can tell, because she's blonde and her glasses are upside down. So they managed to remove the bomb by doing exactly what she doesn't suggest. Well, except for the last bit, because her name's Irene, and her nickname was Professor E. Irony.
Wouldn't it be ironic if a professor known for being wrong finally got something right?
Oh, it's almost over, it's almost over, it's almost over. And just in case we've not understood what passes for humour with her, she instantly falls in love with Rimmer, and within a minute of saving Lister's nuts, she trips into an airlock and spaces herself. Mainly off screen, because showing stuff in a visual medium is for losers.
Don't touch the buttons! Don't touch the buttons! Don't.
Okay, I am not a fan of this episode. It doesn't feel like a story, but a series of events that are only tenuously connected through demented logic that doesn't resemble the science it's allegedly based on. In short, I thought it was crap. And I finally realised something that's been bothering me in the back of my mind. Is it just me, or does Crichton look terrible this series? Is it the lighting, the materials, the camera? Has the design changed? Probably all the above. He looks like a square-headed pack lad. Actually, nah. Crichton looks like a bow-selected parody of himself. Previous series made him look convincingly like a man made out of plastic. Here he looks like a guy in a suit. A crapper suit than before. It's the worst he's looked since he was played by David Ross in Series 2. Dear Dave is next. It's the first of two that were written quickly during the Christmas break. And not only that, but it had to be extensively rewritten during filming. They had so little completed after the main shoot with the audience that they had to do whole new scenes with the green screen. Anyway, Lister's depressed with the human race being destroyed. He misses their little faces going to work, the way they invented everything he knows. Crichton, though, disagrees. They weren't good enough for him. He could find a much better species. An opinion that would hold much more water if every non-human group they'd ever met weren't awful.
You never liked the human race, did you? Quite honestly, sir, I never thought they were good enough for you. I never thought they were very nice to you, sir. Quite frankly, sir, I think you could do better.
So, Rimmer's being charged with dereliction of duty for not reporting for duty in 3 million years, even though he reported for duty in Series 8.
They've looked into your actual service record and have realised that you haven't reported for duty in over 3 million years.
And before you comment, Crichton said haven't, which means hasn't reported. Not didn't, which means eventually did. Also, yeah, this is maybe not the same Rimmer as Series 8, but surely it counts for something. You see, he'd somehow been sending letters to the Jupiter Mining Corporation, suggesting himself for commendation. So many letters that the still-running automated system investigated his service record and found it lacking. Lacking 3 million years of work.
They've looked into your actual service record and have realised that you haven't reported for duty in over 3 million years.
But I've been dead for most of that.
He brings up a really good point. Wouldn't a system that deals with a ship that can last this long and bring back the dead not have rules in place for dealing with the formerly dead? Did George McIntyre get in trouble for missing a shift between his death and resurrection? Maybe it went mad. Computers apparently do that a lot. If he's found guilty, he'll be demoted and not be the highest ranking person on board, and that will not do. It's way too important to allow himself to fuck up, so he sends Crichton off to deal with that.
Please, sir, don't order me to help you. You know how much I hate helping you.
Crichton.
Anyway, Rimmer then tries to get Lister out of his funk as only he can, by insulting him and demonstrating 16th century seduction techniques. He wants Lister to be ready for possibly meeting a future woman. Naturally, this leads to him trying to hit on a coffee machine.
I've always said to the others, you know, if you want a good cup of coffee, go to the Spencer 23. She makes the best coffee.
Are you
hitting on me.
Series 10 brings the early idea of having sentient machines on board Red Dwarf back with a vengeance. I'm guessing because they were cheaper than proper guest stars. Anyway, in our first green screen scene, Rimmer needs to raise some money to bribe the Medi-computer for a sick note to avoid getting in trouble for the missing work. So Crichton suggests cutting the toilet paper. You see, even though Red Dwarf is 3 million years in deep space, it somehow still gets supplies and a budget. And Rimmer's going to do some harmless embezzling to raise the cash. They don't explain this, but I assume the ship's been travelling towards Earth and it's reached the outskirts of what was human space. An automated ruin. The mail pods arrived, but crashed into the ship, destroying a few miles of Kat's suits. Kat helpfully explains this via charades. Hopefully the mail brought the plot with it. Among the letters, Lister finds out that he might have got an ex-girlfriend pregnant.
I don't know whether it's yours or Roy's.
Roy? Oh, not Roy. Not Roy. Do you mean she was sleeping with Roy?
I know. It's terrible. She could have spent that time thinking of a joke. Anyway, this vending machine's jealous that Lister might have hit on the other one. You know, there's occasions when you stop and realise that this show can be odd sometimes.
She's such a trashy-looking machine. Is that what you like, Dave? Trashy.
You all look identical.
You know, Lister's 2 subplots in this episode. Why can't Kat have this? Have him fall in love with a sexy voice machine that dispenses fish on command. It practically writes itself.
Fish! Today's fish is trout a la creme. Enjoy your meal.
I will.
And you wouldn't have had to have Kat randomly do charades for 2 minutes out of desperation to have something to do. Anyway, Rimmer's embezzlement bribe plan to get out of trouble doesn't work, and he needs to fake Lister having a nervous breakdown.
One act of saliva-dripping, mouth-foaming insanity by midnight tonight.
It's a very long story. Luckily, Kat's driving him crazy about his possibly pregnant dead ex-girlfriend. Anyway, Lister tries to patch things up with the jealous vending machine, because if he doesn't, he'll need to walk further for snacks. He does this by giving her a wildest dream, seeing down the corridor.
It's everything I thought it was and more.
Unfortunately, he knocks her over and he tries to get her up again in the most suggestive way possible. This gives Rimmer evidence that Lister's had a nervous breakdown, so he won't be demoted. Happy ending.
What did I tell you, sir? I knew you'd find another species to settle down with.
Crichton spent the whole day stealing toilet paper as part of that failed plan earlier on, leading to Kat staggering from bathroom to bathroom, desperately searching for relief.
Damn paper! There's gotta be some somewhere!
Which he finds in Lister's second letter.
What an absolute slag.
Okay, this isn't a bad episode, it's got some great stuff, but is incredibly disjointed, and doesn't really have a central plot, just some stuff that influences other stuff. Not really unexpected though, given some of the crap they went through while making it. Now, maybe I'm crazy, but even though I wish Kat had the plot, I think the thing with the vending machine should have continued, because Lister falling in love with her works perfectly as a Red Dwarf plot, and has more possibilities for jokes than mooning over Kachansky again.
Smeg, sorry.
I knew you'd come around, you naughty boy.
Yeah, like you never fucked a robot.
The last episode is the beginning, nicely mirroring the pilot, the end, because they didn't know if the show would be back again. Very cleverly, this episode was mainly cannibalized from the unmade Red Dwarf movie script. We open to a flashback to Rimmer's childhood as he's late for class, and his father, the teacher, uses him as an example of peer pressure by having his class each get a question wrong, and watching Rimmer go along with it. Then it's 3 million years later, and a simulant has got on board, seeking revenge.
You killed my brother.
1 floor down, sir.
This is Hoagie the Rogie, one of late Red Dwarf's better inventions. He's not evil, he's just bored and wants to enlist the crew in a death-defying revenge duel across space and time. Because there's not much else to do.
I will not rest until you are choking on your own warm blood.
Sounds fair to me.
Unfortunately, this isn't the first time and Lister's got bored of it.
Oh, duels across time and space.
Why?
Hoagie's played by Richard O'Callaghan, aka the creator from Back to Earth. And yes, he can't see in that costume. In the end, they argue him down to a baking contest, and the prize will be his map of every useful thing in the galaxy. Derelicts, wormholes, you know. Alas, he stole it from a simulant death ship and it's come calling. A volley of fire leaves a small hole in the hull. A hole that's soon filled by a rogie called Hoagie.
Look, I'll be back. I don't know how, I don't know when.
You abandon me? Then I have no choice. I challenge you to a duel. Oh, what's the point?
Because simulants hate humans, Rimmer assumes he'll be okay, being a hologram and all. But Crichton explains that everyone on board, regardless of their race, will be taken as Lister's lieutenants and killed just as painfully. Now, the simulants on this death ship are unusual because their leader, Gary Cady, was great in Eric the Viking. Anyway, the simulants on the death ship are cyborgs rather than human-looking robots. I know this because one tries to commit harikiri. Are these guys special? Are all simulant cyborgs now? Were they always cyborgs? I have no idea. Anyway, the attack on the dwarf continues and they escape in a blue midget, hiding in a local asteroid field. The simulant general has a brilliant approach to dealing with his underlings, i.e. complaining that they're all yes men and then having the first one to disagree with him murdered.
Kill him.
What? It's an oldie, but a very, very goodie.
Now find the ship!
Anyway, in the asteroid field, they pass the time by discussing their upcoming deaths. Well, except Rimmer.
At least my death was dignified.
I'd hardly call yelling mummy, mummy dignified.
Lister, I didn't yell mummy, mummy.
No, you didn't have the time. You just yelled m.
Now, Lister, I watched that episode for this show I do where I talk about something called Red Dwarf in kind of a calm and disinterested way. And he definitely said gazpacho soup, which you mocked him about.
Super?
They then bring up the end of Series 8 and how Rimmer saved the day.
The highly corrosive microorganism, exactly. We got out of that one.
Yeah, thanks to me.
Oh, sir, you cannot claim the credit for that.
Since this is apparently the original hologram Rimmer, I'll assume they went with the unfilmed ending where Rimmer as Ace Rimmer saved the day. Anyway, they challenge Rimmer to use his years of military experience playing Risk to formulate a plan of attack. Bit of a challenge when all the weapons they have on board are some forks and a pencil sharpener. I'm not even sure they have pencils on boards, so that might just be a guillotine for worms. And Hoagie's gun that Lister nicked earlier on because he figured it'd be important for the plot. Also, Kat's showing how much he understands the seriousness of the situation.
I love the string game. You've thought of your plan yet? You can't think of anything, can you?
Kat comes up with a suggestion, though. Maybe Rimmer's issues that hold him back are down to his father. Rimmer's been holding on to a holo recording his dad gave him, with the instructions of not playing it until he became an officer. If he plays the message early, he symbolically gives his father a fuck you, and maybe clears his head of some issues.
It means I don't care what he thinks anymore.
Arnold, I'm not your father.
Damn right you're not, it's this guy from Better Than Life. Turns out that Rimmer's birth dad was the gardener, that's why his other dad treated him so badly. Who knew the polymorph would get his mum so right?
Darling, I wish you could have seen him in action. He was like a set of pistons in an ocean liner engine room.
Anyway, Rimmer figures that at least his birth dad would be very proud of all he's achieved.
He'd be so proud. Second technician in the JMC, senior officer in a mining ship, and I don't smell of manure.
Always a plus. And Rimmer has a plan. Naturally, the rest of the team thinks it's suicide.
Who's against?
But Rimmer remembers the flashback at the start of the episode and decides to not go along with everyone else, to stand firm. They fly into the middle of a group of simulant ships and wait for them to fire.
It's the way of all things. You live, you die.
But sometimes you live, you die, and then you live again.
In other words, witness me!
No!
Lister then uses the gun stolen from Hoagie to destabilize the bulkheads of the blue midget, allowing the missiles to pass through the ship and hit the simulant vessels on the opposite sides. I'm calling that a 4 on the ridiculous science scale. Good effort. And in case you're wondering, yes, they remembered how writing is meant to work and we had set up some stuff. Chekhov would be so proud.
Crichton, set a course for Red Dwarf. The slime's coming home.
That is a very good, strong end to Series 10. I'm really curious about how the movie would have gone after seeing it. I wasn't a big fan of the reveal of Rimmer's parentage, though. I feel it makes it all a little less tragic. Overall, Series 10 is mainly returned to form. It's the Fool's Gold era. Not as good as the Golden era, but it looks a lot like it. The lows of this series are a little lower than the best stuff in Series 7 or 8, and its highs sometimes reach the earlier series is. All in all, it's nice to have the boys from the Dwarf back again, and it bodes well for the rest of the Dave era.